Welcome back to another episode. I know things look a little different, and I wanted to sit down and talk all about that in today's episode. I feel that there need no introduction at this point, so let's just chat. This feels really weird to say for the first time, but welcome to the first official episode of So Delicate. And honestly, this is kind of an emotional thing for me because technically this is episode 10 of the podcast as a whole, but it also feels like a new beginning at the same time. And I think that's why today's episode is called The Undoings of a Perfectionist. Because if I'm being completely honest, I think that perfectionism has quietly controlled so much of my creativity for a long time, even with this podcast. Because when I first created Pretty Delicate Conversations, as we once knew her, I had this very specific vision in my head of what I thought the podcast needed to be. I wanted it to sound polished, aesthetic, meaningful, well thought out, and honestly, perfect. Perfect branding, perfect flow, perfect topics, perfect editing, perfect image. The whole shebang. And don't get me wrong, while there's nothing wrong with wanting to create something beautiful and intentional, I do think that somewhere along the way, I started putting so much pressure on myself that it became creatively exhausting. And I really started to overthink everything. Like, is this deep enough? Is this smart enough? Does this sound professional enough? Am I saying the right things? Am I presenting myself the right way? And even when I had Caitlin come on the podcast, I was thinking of like, dang, did I ask enough questions? Were these good questions? And I don't know. I think I slowly started losing the person I was when I started the podcast. And I was losing sight of the reason why I even wanted to start the podcast in the first place. Because at the core of it all, I just wanted to connect with people. I want conversations that feel honest, human, comforting, real. And recently, something kind of unexpected inspired me to rethink all of this. Welcome to So Delicate, the podcast where honesty meets femininity. I'm your host, Sadie, and every 15th, we explore life, beauty, motherhood, healing, and everything in between. This is your space for honest, feminine, unfiltered conversations. So, let's chat. So let's talk about it. I watched the first episode of Tana Mojo's new podcast, Brand Safe. And that, my friends, is where our story begins. This is actually the first time that I have ever really watched anything of Tana. I've obviously known of her. I feel like she's a pretty staple, like, household kind of name. But I never really felt like her content aligned with where I was at in life. But through social media, I learned that she was going on to do a solo podcast. And when the episode popped up on my feed, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to take a listen and see what she's got to say. And honestly, I'm low-key glad that I did, because what stood out to me most wasn't drama or shock value or anything like that. It was just simply her unapologetically being herself. She was vulnerable, messy, but like in a good way, because she has some conversations about Adam Sandler, and that's like the fun, messy part. But anyway, funny, honest, self-aware, and you could just feel that she wasn't trying to force perfection. And it reminded me that people don't actually connect with perfection. They connect with honesty. And I really think watching that episode of Brand Safe kind of reignited something in me creatively. It made me realize that I don't want to show up perfectly packaged all the time in order for my voice to matter. I don't have to sound the smartest or the most polished. I don't even have to have every sentence perfectly planned out. I can just talk. And let me tell you, I'm a yapper, okay? I'm good at it. I can evolve. I can change. I can outgrow versions of myself creatively. And I think that's kind of where we're at with the podcast. I really want to take a step back from trying to make everything perfect, trying to make every episode perfect, trying to make sure that I look, I sound, I give this perfect performance every episode. I want it to be authentic, and I think I've just been struggling to kind of let go of that because I am a perfectionist, and I don't want to worry about being perfect or making this podcast perfect, because the stories that will be shared once I have branched off and am able to have more guests come on, those stories aren't going to be perfect. And that kind of stems back from like the core values of the podcast and what the podcast really means. And it's really just that we are having honest, feminine, unfiltered conversations. And I want it to really feel like you are here in the room and it's just us kikiing it up, basically. Or you're here in the room with me and my guest and we're all just kikiing it up. I don't want it to feel like overdone, like super overdone with like production and like having everything perfectly mapped out and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed listening or watching. I watched the YouTube video. I really liked watching Tana's podcast episode because she really got deep with it, and I learned a lot about her from just that episode alone, especially as someone who doesn't actively follow Tana or her content. And I thought it was really nice because, like I said, I know of her and I know of her past. I don't know the Tana today, who, might I say, has really evolved, which says a lot from someone who doesn't actively watch her and has not actively watched her since the beginning of times. But because I know of her, I know some of the things that she's gotten into, scandals, this, that, the third. But I feel like she has really evolved and matured, and she's had a lot of growth. And I may not have been following her from the beginning, but I do plan on following her through this journey. I feel like this is the content that does align with me, and I feel like she's at a different place than she was when she first started, which obviously we would only hope that that would be the case. If not, we would, maybe be a little concerned at that point. But there is evolution, and I really liked hearing her talk about, and it was like, oh, she met Adam Sandler, and it was just like the most fangirl experience ever, and I loved every minute of it for her, and how it came about that she even met him, how there were so many times that she could have and chose not to, and the universe came full circle, and she ended up meeting him in the most organic and unplanned way. Like, it wasn't something she orchestrated by any means. It literally just fell right into her lap, and I loved hearing about that experience, and like just small things like that, because I don't know, with her being an influencer, she's in the celebrity crowds and, stuff like that. It's like fun to see that she also gets excited to meet other big stars and celebrities and influencers, whoever. And so, yeah, I thought that was really wholesome and just kind of fun to see. She did get a little deep at times where she was like on the verge of tears, and that really like spoke to me, that she's able to be that in touch with her feelings while being on camera and not shying away from them, which I feel in her past, that is probably something that she would kind of close off to the world, to us. And so I found it very admirable. And I don't know, if you haven't watched or listened to the episode, I do recommend that you do, because even if you are not someone who actively follows her or has followed her, take it from me, I am also that person, and I thoroughly enjoyed the episode. And it was just such a cool laid back setting. She's like sitting on this convertible down in front of the Hollywood sign, just chilling. And honestly, shout out to her, because the weather was working in her favor. I was like thinking about how the wind could pick up at any moment, but it was just a calm, chill, nice, sunny day in Hollywood for her. And I'm like, what are the odds that for her first episode too, that Mother Nature would cooperate for it? So the whole vibe was just super chill and relaxed, and it's almost like her virtual diary in a sense. Like, she did mention how, she wants it to feel very intimate, and like we're looking through her notes app, or, on a FaceTime call with her, that kind of vibes. And that's genuinely what I want to bring to my own podcast. And after watching her podcast episode, I was like, you know what? It's time for a change. And I feel like it's a little early to be rebranding. I mean, we are only 10 episodes in, but I also feel like doing a rebrand this early on is a little bit better than 100 episodes in and like, hey, yeah, so now I'm gonna change the name, I'm gonna rebrand, have a new logo. Like, I feel like that would be a little bit more awkward than doing it now when we're so early on with the podcast. So it does make sense to do it now. And honestly, even before I watched Tana's episode, I had been kind of thinking and tossing up the idea about maybe I need to change the name of the podcast. I do have a small business. For anyone that might be new, I have a small business where I sell cute, aesthetic, girly cups for iced coffee, water, juice, you name it. The cups are just super cute, fun, and girly. But the small business is named Pretty Delicates. So as you can see, with a podcast being named Pretty Delicate Conversations, firstly, it's a mouthful. Second, it's too close to the small business, and I want them to be separate. They are not two things. at the time, I did think it was kind of cute and fun to do a play on the small business name to incorporate it, because it does align with the core values and everything of us having, delicate, intimate, honest, unfiltered conversations. But again, I'm just like, okay, maybe they're a little too similar. So I had already started thinking, probably like 2-3 episodes prior to this one, that, maybe I should look at changing the name. But then I was on the fence, because I was like, is it too early for a rebrand? And circling back, I really feel like this is a more appropriate time to do it than later on. So I just ultimately saw this episode from Tana's podcast and was like, yeah, so I'm going to lock it in at this point. Like, this, I think, was my sign to just confirm the rebrand, that yes, we are going to move forward with this. So we are no longer Pretty Delicate Conversations. I had tossed up a couple names, not even a couple, it was just 2. But I had tossed up some name ideas, and the first one was Pretty Delicate. And without really thinking about it, I was just like, wait a minute. Pretty Delicate. No, that's not gonna work. And I also wanted to make sure that the name was short, simple, easy to remember. Like I said, Pretty Delicate Conversations, it was cute, but I also feel like it's a little too long for a podcast name. And the Instagram handle was very long, so I was just like, yeah, we need to find something that's cute, short, sweet, simple, straight to the point. And so obviously Pretty Delicate was not gonna work. And so then I started bouncing around some other ideas, and I landed on So Delicate, because it's still cute, fun, fresh, girly, feminine, on brand with the core of the podcast, and like the tagline of feminine, honest, unfiltered conversations. So I was like, you know what? I actually really like this, and I was sold on that name after that. So I was like, you know what? This is going to be fun. I came up with the little logo and rebranded the Instagram account. So now it is the Instagram handle is So Delicate Podcast. Unfortunately, So Delicate by itself was already taken, so I just added podcast at the end. Y'all know who I am. But yeah, I'm really excited for the rebrand. I'm really excited to just kind of go off script, if you will, and really just not overthink it and see what comes from the podcast with this slight tweak of things where it's not so by the book, So I'm looking forward to the episodes that are to come, and for the guests that are to be had on the podcast. I really look forward to the change and the direction that we are headed with this podcast. And I have Tana Mojo to thank for that, which is so crazy because, like I said, I just have never been one to follow her. And immediately after I watched her episode, I subscribed to the channel, gave the video a like, and I will be so sat and ready to watch the next episode when it comes out. I know it's every Saturday, and I'm going to be gone for a bachelorette trip for my best friend, so I will be sat and ready to watch it on Sunday when I get back. So, yeah, I mean, that's all it took was that one episode. And I was, thoroughly, invested in the episode. There was not a minute where I was not. And so, yeah, I'm really surprised but excited that Miss Tana Mojo was able to reignite the excitement and creativity and motivation that I have for this podcast. So we have so much to look forward to. Truly. I'm genuinely tired of feeling like every single piece of content has to be flawless before it deserves to exist. Sometimes I want to ramble. Like I said, I'm a yapper. I'm so good at it. Sometimes I want to cry. I want to be vulnerable. I want to laugh at myself. I want to admit that I don't have everything figured out, because I don't. And I think there's something really beautiful about allowing yourself to be seen in progress instead of only presenting yourself once you feel polished enough. I think perfectionism can be a really isolating thing, especially as women, and especially online, because there's the constant pressure to be beautiful, successful, emotionally intelligent, productive, aesthetically pleasing, mentally healed, perfectly articulate, all at the same time. And honestly, that's exhausting. I really don't want this podcast to feel emotionally distant or overly curated anymore. Like I said, by the book. I don't want that anymore. I want it to feel like a real conversation. Like I said, sitting in a room and kikiing it up. And basically just talking about life and, things we're healing from and going through. And maybe this episode is giving me permission to stop trying so hard to appear perfectly put together all the time. Okay, y'all, I'm not gonna lie. My camera died. And I really don't know where I just left off, because I had to run all the way downstairs to grab my extra battery because I thought I had it up here and I didn't. So I was like rambling for a little bit, and then it cut off and I was mid-thought, and then I had to leave the vicinity to go get the battery. And now here we are. So I just want to conclude this episode by saying thank you for being here for this episode and all the episodes that are to come. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast, especially if you've been a listener and or viewer from the very first episode. I really do appreciate you guys, and I really do have high hopes and high expectations for the podcast moving forward, and I really do think that these changes are exactly what was needed for the podcast, and I really think that it is going to do this podcast so much justice, and I can't wait to continue evolving and making it better and more enjoyable for you as a viewer and listener. So, with that being said, I do hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please give it a big thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to share it with a friend and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the new name, So Delicate. I personally really like it. I think it's so cute, very dainty, and like I said, it's very memorable. It's very easy to remember, so I think that will be very helpful as well. And what do we think of the new logo? You guys will have to let me know about that as well. But this is really it for today's episode, and I just want to say I love you so much, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye!